So before we begin, I invite all of our panelists to share a little bit about what interests them about mentoring. So what makes interesting to you the concept of mentoring?
Do we all go one after another?
Sure. Anybody's good to go.
Yeah, so considering I have two A's in my name, I'll go first. I think there was a reason why my dad called me Aarti with two A's in the beginning. I always, I'm used to going first. So Rhea, I think it's a very good question, and I think my understanding of mentoring and what it is has actually evolved, and I think continues to evolve over the years, right? And I think one started with assuming that in a mentoring relationship, there is one person who gives and the other person who receives. But over the years, both in the event of my being mentored individually by several wonderful people, whether it was in college or at TES or at NIMHANS, for me, I think I have reflected and then really found that in that mentoring relationship, the mentor gets almost as much, if not more, as the mentee does. So whether you're talking about individuals or you're talking about organizations, right? Where I am today, I try and facilitate mentoring across organizations. So my view is that the assumption that mentoring is one person giving, other person receiving, I think that has changed, and that comes from self-reflection and really sitting down and thinking about the content of the engagement and the relationship. So that's sort of my take on it.
Thank you for sharing that, Aarti. Daniel, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. So for me, there are two areas of interest. So one is throughout my work, I've come to realize that the most sustainable development is for people to realize their rights in any country, as citizens, in an equitable and in a fair manner. And this is especially true of women, young people, and girls. So my commitment is to make sure that there's some kind of enablement for them to do that. The second interest is that throughout my career, many young people have shared their anxieties and their worries, especially with regard to their personal and professional growth. And now I think there's an intergenerational transition taking place. Half the world is young. And especially in Asia, if you look at Asia, India, around 60% of the people in India are young, and they are entering the workplace. They're becoming consumers. They're starting up families, and I think that there needs to be some mechanism whereby they are enabled to do these things effectively. So it's a responsibility of all institutions, the public sector, private sector, the civil society, to make sure that there's an environment of enablement for young people to fulfill their aspirations. And that is why I think the work that Hemakshi that you do and Aarti that you do are so important, because we need to make sure that young people are included in processes that that make decisions with regard to them. So I think that is the second one. And the third point really is what I want to say. Third point is that how do young people, especially those without experience, how do they join institutions? How do they join organizations? And they find it very difficult now. There's a lot of worry. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of mental issues. A lot of young people need psychosocial care now. So I think it is a responsibility, especially of my generation, to make sure that we are able to provide as much support as possible for these young people to kind of, into the mainstream of, a democratic process and be a part of, an enjoyable citizenship. So I think these are my interests. I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think some great points there. I think from making sure that the young people who need to be a part of these institutions, and how do you fast track that professional development for them through mentoring to get them ready for the workforce. It's a great point. Thank you. Hemakshi, would you like to go next?
Yeah. I think as I was hearing Aarti and Daniel talk, I realized I'm at a very interesting point in life where I'm still a mentee of a lot of people, and now suddenly I have to be a mentor of a few people as well. So there is that overlap that I'm in. So I'm in the young people that Daniel spoke about, but also benefited a lot by being in spaces where I've been in position of mentor, that Aarti was talking about how beneficial it is. I think for me, it's the simple reason that my life shifted because of the mentors I got, and continues to, those experiences continue to be transformative for me. Just, I know, like, I grew up in a very, very regular middle class family. My trajectory, whatever it shifted because of a few statements or a few interactions with mentors, the reflective spaces that they were able to create for me, the opportunities they were able to open my eyes to. And I think now that in the past few years, I've actively tried to be in spaces where I can be a mentor, not because I want to give, but also because I receive so much from those experiences. I know it's so fulfilling. Like, it's Sunday tomorrow. I'm really looking forward to sleeping that extra hour, but I'm also looking forward to doing all the tasks I have to do for my mentees, because it's so fulfilling and so different. So I just think the nurturance that these spaces and these relationships bring, and the transformative potential of the relationship is, I think, what makes me most excited.
Thank you for sharing that, Hemakshi. I totally resonate with what you just said with around mentoring being transformative. I think we often underestimate the power of mentoring when it's just tossed around as a word, but thank you for bringing attention to the power of it. Sovan, would you like to share next?
Sure. So, for me, mentoring, in fact, I've been mentoring all the professionals, especially on their leadership development, and especially on the other side, on the entrepreneurship side, all the startups. So, over the years, what I have seen is many startups, they have come back and they keep saying that, if I had a mentor, probably, I would have scaled faster, or this particular business would have been good. So that is typical. Today many startups don't even understand that they need a mentor. But then there are startups who have gone through all these pain. They realize this. In fact, on the professional side also, that people are into their career development, they come back with various perspectives and say that my growth is not, things are not working for me. I'm not able to move further in my career. I really don't know what to do next. And what I've realized is that over a period of years, is many of these people, they are actually lost, and they want somebody to talk to. That's the biggest challenge today. They want to share. And in fact, in my own career development also, if somebody says that, yeah, you are doing great, I feel good about it. Otherwise, I'm in a, I'm moving forward on the road, but I don't know what exactly, whether I'm taking the right path or not. So we need somebody to show that torch, or somebody to keep us on the track. I would consider that, as a mentor, we are like the railway tracks, right? Who has to continue to keep the train on the tracks. So that's the typical role. And when we talk about the startups, what essentially happens is, when a startup founder, they actually come up with an idea, and then they say that I want to do something. There is a lot of opposition that they get from either from the friends, from the family circle, and they start with a lot of belief system. So when they start off with their belief, when they start moving, and over a period of time, over the years, they go through a lot of troubles, and there are many startups who actually drop. Many entrepreneurs, they drop completely. And when they drop, what essentially happens is that their friends and family circle, they will come back and say, you know what, I told you, this is something, this is not going to work. In fact, it's not about whether something will work for them or not. It's about somebody would have been guiding them. Definitely they would have scaled much faster. And for me, I can't see somebody who starts with a belief, and over 3-4 years they lose that belief, completely self-belief on themselves. That I can't see. Somebody who starts with an idea and they want to really grow, they want to create an employment opportunities, they have belief in themselves. That belief should not get shaken. They may pivot, or they may do something different, but they should continue to have that self. And for me, I want to see all those startups become successful, create more success in the startup journey for a lot of founders, and make sure that what you are doing is the right thing, because you have taken a challenge, and I want to help them that's about mentoring for me. It's very, very passionately connected.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I think what was interesting is that you highlighted the range of things that mentoring can help with solving, all the way from barrier resolution, which is a common thing that mentoring is associated with, to also restoring self-assurance, which is so important in something like starting an organization from scratch. So thank you for bringing that to the forefront. Sumanta, would you like to go next?
Yeah, for me, being a mentor, uh, the most happy part I enjoy every day, every time. This is an exceptional way to be a mentee for me. When Aarti ma'am, you have already said that that's a two-way thing, and we all believe that. Being a mentor is, I cannot share how much love I get, how much respect I get. But more than that, I have explored a different dimension of being in this earth, being in some kind of work. I have explored this thing. And the most important part for me is whenever we are transferring, we are giving our knowledge, we are sharing our knowledge, methods with empathy by understanding the circumstances or the people around you. We unknowingly explore a different kind of part of our own self, our own personality, our own life, even our family, even personal bonding. So this is a unique relationship for me, being a mentor. That's all I can say now.
Amazing. I have just the question for you as a panel in just a minute. Thank you everyone for responding to this. I think it gives us a better idea of what connects you to the concept of mentoring. And I'm sure we're up for a great conversation today. Now that we know why our panel is interested in mentoring and talking about it with us today, we'd also like to learn from the audience what they think about mentoring. I'm sure we'd all learn from that. What I would like the audience to do now is think of words that come to your mind when you think of mentoring. It could be words or it could be phrases. And we'd love to learn from you what you're thinking. So please feel free to type them in the chat box. And you can send as many as you'd like, any word or phrase that you associate with mentoring. I would, as the answers start coming in, I already see one on the chat box. I'd also like for the panelists to read through those and tell us their thoughts as they read the chat box. And if something resonates with them or is something that they would like to talk more about. Devika says it is 1-to-1 and Ali says support. Guidance, nurturing. This is an interesting one. Helping someone see their potential. I used to think personally that mentoring, a mentor would tell me exactly what to do. I have a problem and I take it to a mentor, and they're going to tell me, okay, this is the solution to your problem. But in fact, it isn't that. It is helping someone see their potential, like Lake has put on the chat box. Would anybody like to share from the panel about what they think about that and how they came to discover that about mentoring?
Yeah, so for me, I think this is one of the questions: how has mentoring evolved? Formally, I think mentoring was about the mentor. It was about the mentor's experience, the mentor being a role model, and the mentee, wanting to, adopt, behaviors and the characteristics of the mentor. But I think it has changed now. I think sometimes the mentee has a lot of information and sometimes more knowledge, than the mentor, through various. So I think it is the role of the mentor to help structure the mentee's thoughts, and problem solve together. So it requires a lot of listening skills. It requires a lot of empathy. It requires understanding the mentee's circumstance, and not only with regard to the area that's being that the mentee wants to be mentored on, but also holistically, because you cannot isolate the mentee circumstances from the issue that you're talking about. So you have to be sensitive to the mentee circumstances also, professional, personal. So I agree that it's about surfacing capabilities, surfacing potential, but also engaging in joint problem solving to address challenges and constraints. So I think that's a very good point.
Yeah, I just want to take off from what Daniel said, and because I am more involved at the organizational mentoring bit, where we have a group of people that's helping somebody think through their organizational challenges through the I Volunteer Whiteboard program. I think our biggest discovery is jointly find solutions to problem solve, but equally the humility to say I don't know. Or I'm not sure this is going to work, and I don't know what the answer is. Right? There is this burden on mentors, whether it is at an individual level or at an organization level. They're expected to know or find solutions to all the problems, right? And that's really unrealistic in my view. There will be moments and situations that can drag on indefinitely due to a variety of circumstances that someone A may not have control over, or someone may choose not to do anything about either. For example, I can give you a real example. Last year, we were working with an organization with a founder deeply passionate, as most founders are. But personality-wise, was not. I mean, it was very clear that a certain path that she was taking was the path that she wanted to go down, right? And it was very evident to everybody else in the group that that path would not lead to the success that she'd envisioned for herself, and two, that she would really fall flat on her face. But I think she wanted to make that mistake and learn from it. And at the beginning, I think for all of us it was very frustrating, because we could see that if she had taken that path down, then the organization would have had to face a lot of other outcomes which she may not have been prepared for. So I think the role that the group then played was to show her the possibilities of what will happen, and then leave the decision entirely to her. And I remember, as an individual at that time, I it really frustrated me to say that I can see that this is going to fail, and I know that, because I could see the kind of person that she was, right? But she chosen, and she went, and of course, predictably, there were the outcomes that we warned her about did surface. But I think she became a stronger person for it. I think it brought in a certain level of humility in her. It brought in a great deal of confidence in the group that was mentoring her, because yeah, we said, I told you so, right? That kind of thing. But I think the important lesson was that you can fail. People won't listen to you, not because they're disrespectful, because they want to make the entrepreneurial mistake and learn from it. And we should respect them and give them that space, as long as it's all within the legal and ethical framework, of course. That goes without saying.
I think I wanted to add very quick thing, is that we live in times of imposter syndrome. All of us, like, it's so rampant. Almost everyone has imposter syndrome, and it's very difficult to see oneself for who they are, or just get perspective, because the story we tell ourselves is mostly like, oh, I'm not good enough, etc., that I don't fit in. So having someone who's just not so deep in your context but still knows you and shows you sides of you that you're, because of imposter syndrome, you're not listening to, I think becomes so important. And sometimes, of course, we see the beauty in others, and this has happened with two of the girls that I'm mentoring right now. I wish I was them. They're 15 years younger than me, but just me saying that one of them shared with me was just so empowering for her, because she's not allowed to say that in the context that she's coming from. So yeah, just hearing a different perspective from someone, I think, can be very empowering.
Great. And all of the points that are being brought forward have a sense of a very deep insight into mentoring that comes from engaging with it for a while. Things like what Aarti said just a moment ago about part of the characteristics essential to be a mentor is knowing when to let your mentee fail, right? And then that's such a hard trait to acquire, and we'll talk more about what makes a good mentor towards a little bit later in this workshop. But now that we have an idea of what some of our audience members think of when they hear the word mentoring, I'd move to my first question for the entire panel, which some of you have already answered a little bit. How has the term mentoring evolved for you over a period of time? And what does it mean to you right now? You can also let us know what you think of how the pandemic has maybe changed your understanding of mentoring and how important it is. Sumanta, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you. Yes, pandemic. It's a big word though, but we have explored many things that we couldn't have done before pandemic. Pandemic, lockdowns, stuck into a single dimensional world, that's painful, obviously. But in that space, we have explored the limitless vibes of our own self. What we are, what we can be, what we were. Those questions, we often skip those questions because we need to earn many things, not only money, we need to keep going, keep running, not only walking. So that pause was much needed. And eventually, in this time frame, I have explored another level of mentoring in me. Who am I? Uh, Professionally, I am a mentor. I am an actor, director also, obviously. But I have another part. I am a psychological counseling practitioner also. So that thing is obviously helping me. That part of me is helping my whole. Uh, but I think, knowing something, knowing many things in a such area, having a lot of expertise, and also keeping that beginner's mind, that makes a mentor a great mentor. And Aarti ma'am said, and all of us, we agree, obviously, that situation we always face, not always, we all face. What if I don't know? What if I can't help? What if I can't do? Then what? That's where we need to start another thing, that our mentees, they are also blessed or gifted by some elements. They are born mentors. So that's why we keep saying that's a both way thing. We don't only give, we also get. When we stuck, when we stop, when we pause, our mentees, that's what we do. I would like to share one thing. One of my students, I usually work with, my core area is like adolescent and underprivileged, not totally underprivileged, like underprivileged by materialistic things. One of my students, she was facing some problem from her family to get married early. She wanted to do something great with her life. She asked me, "Sir, what should I do?" I asked, "What you want to do?" "I don't want to get married, sir." I said, "But you cannot stand against your family like that. They are your family. You need to show empathy. That's not your opponent. You cannot fight with guns and knives." So, are you aware of why they are saying that's out of love? You cannot fight against love. You cannot fight against worry of parents. So what you can do? You can do enlightenment. You can do enlightenment. You can aware them. You can share some knowledge what you have. You can be a mentor of them so that you can share what you are feeling. She did the same, but she didn't stop there. I just said she was willing to be a great person, to do great with the society. She didn't stop there. That experience pushed him so hard, she became another social activist and she stopped early marriage. And I feel proud of that thing. So that's the feel of being in it, not like not being successful always. For me, this is the angle of exploring mentorship. And it has changed, like reshaping continuously. At first, I felt like I'll be sharing knowledges only. I'll be sharing experiences only. But no, not at all. It's a kind of exploring part. I love the exploring part being a mentor. what she can do, what he can do, what all the mentees can do better than me.
Thank you for sharing that example story with us, Sumanta. I think from what you were sharing, one word that I really like associating with mentoring is seeking. We're all seeking, we're all learning in whatever field we're working in. And it just so happens that we sometimes need people to help us seek better and in better, more efficient ways, help us understand ourselves better. And then that's what I'm associating with this example you've shared with us. Thank you, Shumanta. Sovan, do you have something to share about how mentoring has evolved for you?
Yeah. So I would not say that mentoring has evolved only because of pandemic, because that is what today people are thinking, that more and more startups and professionals, they are getting into what they are seeking help from mentors. But that's today what we feel about it. But in fact, it has been there from very 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 long. I would say right from my career start, I have been listening about this word. In fact, when I was working in the organization, they say somebody, there should be a mentor mentee model. That is how we have seen in the career. That is how the term has come up. But when we talk about real mentoring, people always thought that it is something which is pushed, just like in an organization. That, you need to have a mentor, and that is how we have to build or have a buddy system, something like that. Somebody who can help you, right? Or somebody who can guide you. That is how it started. Over a period of time, what people have realized that mentoring is not only specific to taking support or help or guidance within the organization. It can come from outside the organization, and that is where most of the that's the realization many people are having, and that is where this whole term of mentoring and professionals and entrepreneurs seeking help from mentors, that has got started. In fact, I would say that about 5.5 6 years back, uh, there are a lot of people who wanted to call themselves as mentors. I'm a mentor, and put it in LinkedIn. This I'm one of the mentor, and and offer free service. You just take. In fact, that was a model when many of the mentors, so called, who used to call themselves a mentor, they were trying to find their own path. They were trying to figure out how they stand in the society, whether people, they start liking them, take support from them or not. That is how it whole thing started. And over a period of time, there were multiple articles in Forbes, and people started talking about mentoring, and that's where it started evolving again. Now when we put about in the LinkedIn, when we say that, okay, I'm a mentor, I'm an angel investor, so many startups, what they come back, in fact, if I look at all the things which is written here in the chat window: care, active listening, learning, guidance, friendship. In fact, it all started with that. Many times the mentees, they do not, they have all started with, can you help me get funding? Can you help me do something, or can you validate my idea, or can you at least listen to what I have to say? So that is how it has all evolved. And you know uh, today it is a very very different you know relationship between a mentor and a mentee. I see in every startup pitch deck that there would be a slide where they would call that there are so-called, these are my mentors. It has become very common these days. Earlier that never used to be there, but today it is very very common. Now, from a mentor standpoint, let me give a different perspective. That mentoring is not just about caring or helping people see something more than what they are seeing, but it is I would say it is, you are actually becoming a role model, not because you think that you are a role model, but your mentees think that you are a role model, and then we have to live to that particular level of commitment. And our level of commitment is a lot more than what the mentees are expecting. So that is how the whole thing evolves. It's a responsibility that we take, and unless we take that responsibility as a mentor, the mentees are not going to. It's not something saying that I have mentors 5 students, 10 students, but now I have mentors so many startups. It's not about that. It's about creating a difference in that particular startup or founder's life or that particular professional's life. And unless we do that, it is not going to be satisfying. It's not about filling our LinkedIn or resume. Right? So that is where it has been evolving, and people are getting engaged both from a mentee-mentor model. They're getting engaged in this particular fashion today. In fact, I will tell one specific example that at the beginning of the career, many professionals, they would say that, okay, I want to learn this particular skill. I want to be good in Python. I want to be good in data science, and that is how I'll be able to grow in my career. But as a mentor, that mentor will guide you, saying that skill is one thing, but commitment is more important than skill. Are you just focusing on your skill, or we need to focus on the commitment? Because if we take, let's say there are two people who are exactly the same in the skill, knowledge, and the company decides to eliminate one of the employee because of whatever it is. Okay, and person A is having higher commitment versus person B. Who is the person who is going to get fired? It's going to be person with a lesser commitment. So we have to tell everybody that it's about the commitment. So sometimes we help them to see a different perspective, completely different perspective, as to what they think and how they can in fact accelerate in their career or accelerate in their stuff. That's about it, and that is when they start seeing, mentees have started seeing this. That's when this acceptance has grown significantly today. Today it is, in fact, it is a very professional, term where every other startup is seeking for a mentor at the beginning, and of course later that will turn into an investment or whatever, help them into getting into an investment. But more in terms of showcasing that particular founder that you can do a lot more than what you can do today. Giving a completely different objective. Helping them strategize their business, helping them grow. I would rather say that mentor's role is to ensure that a startup founder spends less money and less time and still grows. Can we achieve that? Can we do that? And that's when the discussion happens, and that's when the brainstorming happens. And in fact, I agree with all the panelists. It is not about a mentor being the only person who is guiding. It is the learning journey for both of them. In fact, we learn a lot more than the mentors, and it's a lot more enriching and satisfying than.
Thank you for sharing that. I think something that really stood out to me was one of the things you mentioned about what it takes to be a mentor. It is not that you need X type of skill to do it necessarily. You are looking for commitment, to follow through on what you've signed up to do, to be available when there's a need, and foresee certain things, anticipate certain things, hold yourself back when needed.
Yeah, so I just have a couple of points just to answer your question, Rhea. So you said how important do you think mentoring is, especially post-pandemic? So I think it's quite important because the ways organizations, institutions, individuals manage and implement their work has changed, right? So it's not business as usual, So transactions, have become very different, and these new ways of working require new ways of communication, right? So one of the most important aspects of communication between mentors and mentees has been non-verbal communication, right? So that is very rarely possible now because of this remote, way of communicating. So I think your communication skills, have to change. Maintaining an effective digital presence, so that people, this is also partly to address Aarti's point about this imposter syndrome. So that exactly who you are communicating with, who you are dealing with. And then also I think new capabilities are required, new opportunities need to be accessed. And then I think there are 4 ways in which organizations are developing new skills. One is the upgrading the skills of their employees, right? The second is where they can't upgrade, their recruiting. Where they can't recruit, they are trying to look for short-term technical assistance, right, from people. And then there are also are partnerships that are being established with between organizations. So all of these require some level of mentoring and coaching and hand holding. The other point that I want to raise is my realization is, a lot of people say that mentoring is about empowerment. It is not about empowerment because the mentees have power, right? So when we say empowerment, it is that when I say I'm empowering somebody, it means I'm giving my power to somebody else. That is not true. The mentees have power. They can't use that power because of certain challenges and circumstances. So I think it is our role together, mentees, to figure out how do we dismantle those circumstances, how do we remove those barriers, so the mentees can, achieve their potential, and deploy their capabilities. And then you have also asked how has mentoring evolved. So for me, as I mentioned, there's been a shift in focus from the mentor to the mentee, right? And then there also has been a shift from very generic to very specific areas of mentoring, right? So I think someone mentioned startups, Aarti mentioned board members and governance of the board members, Hemakshi mentioned young political leaders being more transparent. So I think it has become more specific. It has become a two-way discussion from a one-way discussion. It has shifted from the lecture mode to kind of joint. It has shifted from prescription to co-creation, right? Problem solving. Yeah, so formally mentors, which is this is the way you need to do it, but now it's all about kind of co-creation, more remote than face to face now. Yeah, and then a recognition that everyone, despite whatever hierarchy they're in, needs some kind of mentorship. Yeah, so this is actually a fact. Even though with all these years of experience, I'm still learning. I still need people I can share with. And then there's this increased urgency, as I mentioned, because young people are taking ownership of more and more issues, right? So I think they need to be enabled. So to go back to the other point, mentors are not necessarily specialists, or not necessarily, how high up they are in the hierarchy. I worked in many countries, and my mentors have been drivers. They have been, administrators. They've told me how to live, how to adapt to the culture, how to, maintain, your position, within, different cultures, different teams. So I think there's been a complete paradigm shift, from the mentor, to the mentee. I don't know whether that makes sense. So
Absolutely
thoughts I
does.
had.
Absolutely does. And I especially like that part about it moving from prescriptive to more of a co-creation thing now. Which brings me very easily to my next segment that I had planned for everyone, which is I'd like to talk a little bit about some commonly held points about mentoring. Because mentoring is a very loosely used term. It's a very popularly used term. So what are some things that are commonly believed about it? And Arshad here is going to help me with publishing these commonly believed points one by one on the screen. They're about mentoring. And they should be visible to you on the screen. I think the first point will be somewhere around mentees are the sole beneficiaries of a mentoring relationship. You already talked a little bit about this, but what I'd like the audience to do is interact with this and let us know what you think, if this is a myth or a fact. And feel free to elaborate on chat why you think what you think, so all of us can read it. And I know that we've already touched on this, and I have a feeling that all of us are on the same page that mentoring is beneficial for both the mentee and the mentor. Devika here says mutual growth, which is a great term to use. Would anyone like to share something that they're thinking about this?
Yeah, so Rhea, I think that just given what the poll is looking, I don't think there's any disagreement on this. But I think what is critical in this whole relationship is really not taking away the agency of the person being mentored, right? And I think the assumption is that if somebody seeks out mentoring, that they don't have, or their ability to back off from it at any point is limited, right? And I know this is sort of contraindicated to the point around commitment, but I feel we shouldn't be too hung up on it, because people can evolve and change and decide that the mentor is not good enough, maybe, or they need some other kind of support, right? I find So to the point that I think somebody made, saying that all slides in all pitch decks will have a slide on who's mentoring. Okay? And I've often challenged and said, okay, what do these people do? The 5 people over there whose photos you have, each of them is a star in his or her own right. What do they actually do for you, right? And maybe it comes from my own orientation of being extremely action oriented, right? I mean, the interaction interaction needs to lead to some actions that are being taken as a result of that interaction, right? And that often people struggle to comment upon. So I think the limited point I'm making is really around agency, to say that on either side, whether it's the mentor, I think we shouldn't kid ourselves around the chemistry aspect. As South Asians, a lot of our relationships are hugely determined by the chemistry that we strike with others, right? And we interact like that. We're very relationship oriented. Somebody might tick off on all the boxes, but it just may not sit well with you, and you can't put your finger on it, and that's all right. I'm saying we shouldn't endeavor to try and find reasons all the time to say why is this not working. You met somebody, great person, good references, wonderful background. You just didn't hit it off, and that's all right. I think the value you would add to yourself is to walk away from it very quickly, rather than drag it on, unnecessarily, right, and make it uncomfortable and really unproductive for everybody.
Thank you for bringing that up. We have a question just for this, because I think it's really like more conversation about this. Hemakshi, go for it.
I was going to say, I was smiling at Aarti's point about, I was thinking of situations where a mentor-mentee situation where I wish I had walked away from because it wasn't a fit. But the point I was trying to make was about this myth that whether it's a mutually beneficial relationship or the mentee benefits, I do think the circles like this, like these Zoom calls, can be echo chambers even in this, because I think I work in politics and we very deliberately have a structure called regional mentors for our participants, because politics is different for each state, and we realize that we're running a national level organization, but they need local support and local guidance. So we do pair up people with regional mentors. And then I think politics remains a very traditional space where when we approach mentors, so to say, they do think they're doing a favor to people by giving guidance to people. So I do think there are it's good to be in these evolved spaces where we are recognizing that it's a very mutually beneficial process. But I don't think the entire world or all industries or all sectors have moved to calling it that, and we need to recognize that as well. It's definitely a big learning for us that we thought it would be a good opportunity for the mentors also to kind of engage with young politicians, aspiring politicians, to understand what's happening, but not everyone views it that way. And to just meet people where they are in their understanding of mentor-mentee relationships or just the process, I think shifts quite a bit based on sectors, just speaking from recent experience that we've been having.
Absolutely. I think that's an interesting point. That it challenges me also to think of it not always as a two-way beneficial relationship. Thank you for sharing that. I'd like to move on to the next statement about mentoring. Arshad, if you could publish that. It's a mentoring relationship should be organic and accessed as and when needed. This is a question that I'm anticipating some debate over, because we did have a few points just recently about how you should take your time to figure out who's the best fit for you to be a mentor, and that might mean that it's not prescribed to you, a mentoring relationship as a structure that you need to do as part of your professional development. But we could also look at it from another lens, thinking this needs to be a structure, this needs to be a mandate that everybody has a mentor to transition into their new role or become better at what they're already doing. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about this from everyone on the panel, actually.
Yeah, so for me, I think the biggest characteristic of a mentoring relationship should be accountability. The accountability of the mentor to the mentee and the accountability of the mentee to the mentors. I think that's very important. And I think one of the ways in which to establish that accountability to have some kind of structure, for the mentoring relationship, some kind of objectives, some benchmarks, to kind of that you agree on to conclude that you have accomplished a certain objectives of the mentorship, and then also certain kind of time frame. So I think that gives a sense of accountability and gives a sense of responsibility to both the mentor and the mentee. Now I have had situations where people have asked me, can we meet urgently? I need to discuss something with you, and that's fine. I think there also needs to be that flexibility. But I think whatever whether it's organic and accessible or whether it's fixed, I think you have to establish some kind of accountability and responsibility for that mentoring relationship. And I think this is important because the young people I speak to today, they are very anxious, they're very worried, because they assume that with their passion and commitment, and once they have an academic credential, they will succeed, which is not true, right? So there's a responsibility to create some kind of predictability for the future. So how do you create the predictability? You create the predictability by identifying what your aspirations are, identifying what your objectives are, and then identifying, are these the capabilities? Do I have the capabilities to fulfill these aspirations? That's the first part. The second is, if I do not have the capabilities, then what are the capabilities I have to acquire, right? And the third is kind of to create opportunities to use those capabilities. Because a lot of young people, in the applications, they don't succeed because they say, I have done this and, I have qualified in this. But I think the employers now, they're interested in, not who you were, but who you could be in the future. What possibilities, you can bring to the table. What is your value proposition? And so creating opportunities is all about that. So I think that that part of it requires a lot of an organic relationship with a lot of flexibility, right? Because mentees, they face different situations at different times. So, but I think the most important thing is accountability and responsibility, mutual accountability and responsibility. I don't know whether that answers this question.
That makes sense. I got cases for both, how it should be more structured and it should be more fluid in when it's accessed. I'd love to hear from other panelists as well. Sumanta, would you like to go?
Yes, I don't feel that this is not always organic, and this is not only should be accessed when it is needed. Because to feel that need, they need guidance. I'm talking about mentees. They should feel the need. How will they feel the need? So for that, it cannot be organic always. I will stand on somewhere in between. So it is not always organic, because when someone is coming to you as a mentee, they have many things in them. It's not they are coming as zero, not obviously, but they have taken some decision to come to you or to come to a mentor. That means they have something in them. That is obviously some kind of urge, organic, okay. But obviously we cannot access them every time when it's not needed. So it is kind of understanding the situation, the purpose. It depends upon the industries or the fields or the issues we are mentoring on it. It is a bit different every time. So that's my vision. That's my view.
Thank you, Sumanta, for sharing.
I wanted to jump in and actually add something, because I was on the second part that it's probably a myth, because I've benefited so much from structured mentoring that I realized that was a reactive response. I'm going to try and give a more balanced response now. That as I was thinking about it, I think I've different mentors for different parts of my life, right? Like when it's for organization, I have mentors, and it really, really helps to have a structure to it, because I'm okay, good at, say, program design, I can be good at communications, but I really am bad at HR. But if I have a mentor who's meeting me every single week, which happened with me in an incubator, and I'm so grateful for Sumant sir for that weekly calls despite his busy schedule. It was that structure which nudged me to move ahead in putting a performance evaluation system for the organization. If not for the structure, organically I wouldn't have gone, because it's not my strength. It's not even my interest. Sometimes I'd rather do things that I'm good at or take away my bandwidth automatically. So in that case, structure really, really helped me. It kept me going. It helped me move on things that otherwise I wouldn't have moved. But when it comes to more inner work spaces where I'm just like thinking of, say, my leadership style or just what I should be doing to navigate a lot of gender struggles that I encounter working in politics and entrepreneurship, I think that is much more organic. And the examples that both Daniel specifically gave those examples, like I want to pick up the call and say that I'm facing this happened yesterday. So I do think it depends on the need that I have, and the structure should then fit the need. But the larger point I want to make is sometimes one mentor is not going to fulfill all the needs, queries, questions that you have. So I also see it as my responsibility if I'm seeking mentors to have different mentors, and if I'm mentoring someone to say that, no, actually I don't know, maybe someone else in your life is better placed to help you with it. So just discerning that a little bit.
What I'm hearing is that sometimes the mentee might not have the insight to seek mentoring for a topic that they actually need it for. And that's what makes a fluid system not the best for them. That's also a great point to consider. Thank you, Hemakshi.
But it's, I just want to jump in, and I think what we need to probably focus on is the personality of the mentee. Now, I know personally for myself, I'm not very, I've never been somebody who seeks out a lot of advice. It's just not in me. It's not, and there are people around me who've said that, oh, but if you do need help in this. I don't want to take it, right? It's just that I would rather do it in this way and take responsibility for the outcomes of that decision, right? Which is why my point about agency becomes very important. So somebody, earlier made the point about showing mentees that they need help and they may not know that they need help. I'm saying that there could always be a situation where the mentee knows and is aware that she or he needs help, but may choose not to take it for a variety of reasons. Right? Which is the point about agency. Because otherwise, I have found ever so often that you create a very artificial set of circumstances, right? So people are saying the politically correct things. They're doing the head nodding, as is expected, right? And it doesn't serve any purpose, to be honest, because at the end of the day, that individual is going to go and do exactly what she or he pleases. And I loved Sumanta's point about it being fluid in the sense that you can have structure in that entire journey at some point, and it can be very unstructured at some points, right? And to allow that ebb and flow, to be honest, I think then the relationship will be far more productive and fruitful.
I don't know, Rhea, whether there's time for me to add something to what Aarti just said.
We have time.
Okay. So I think this is a very important point because a lot of the young people I speak to, they say, I'm worried, I'm anxious, I need somebody to help me, I need somebody to mentor me. And I think that one of the responsibilities or the role of the mentor is to very specifically drill down into identifying what are the specific anxieties, what are the specific worries, splitting it up. Is this personal? Is this professional? If it's personal, then, kind of what are the things that you're worried about? If it's professional, what are the issues that you're struggling with? So once you kind of break up, the anxieties, it's like eating the elephant, one bite at a time, right? So you kind of address, the ones which, you prioritize, what are the ones which are urgent, what are the ones which are important, what are the ones which you can, put on the back burner, what are the ones that are really, you need to address now. So helping, the mentee together, with the mentor to identify and classify, what are the anxieties, what are the concerns, and, what are the priorities, how do we prioritize them to address them. So I think that has helped, me kind of work with, institutions and organizations as well as kind of young people. Yeah.
When I talk about the startup specifically, it has to be structured. Actually, my point of view, because so you don't want to be a mentor just for the sake of being a mentor. So you have come to give something. And in terms of to the mentees, especially to the founders, what I would suggest is that take time to find your mentor. It's not necessary that you have to be associated with somebody who you spoke to that person once or twice and you feel that this person should be your right mentor. Take time. Just like you would speak to your parents, what is the relationship between you and your parents? You seek help as and when you need. At the same time, there is a very strong bond in relationship, right? So that's the kind of mentor that you would be looking for a startup who's really ready to help you take your journey, your startup to a completely different trajectory. And for that, what essentially is required is that as a mentee, you find the right mentor whom you trust. If you don't trust, of course, it's not about a mentor giving you a particular advice. You're not going to take it and implement that particular advice unless there is a trust. So there has to be, to take time, build that trust in the relationship, take time to find out who is the right mentor. Need not be, you could have your one mentor for entrepreneurship, one mentor for your health or whatever. So it's not necessarily that one mentor fits everything, every part of your, or your professional career development could be a completely different mentor. So you have to take time and find it. At the same time, the mentor should be equally responsible. So you should have discussion with your mentors. What are you going to give to? How is it going to be beneficial for me? It's not about just giving advice and then not taking ownership or responsibility for that particular advice. So you have to come to some kind of a structure and say that, what is the outcome that I can get if I get a position? How can you help me take my business or take my startup to a different level? How can you help me strategize? If that is your need. So that all comes from finding your need and then coming to a very structure. Typically, my mentoring has been where we connect every week. Irrespective of the startup may feel the need of it or not. It's typically once in a week minimum, and feel free to call at any given point. It should be like just like you can call your parents. So similarly, my mentees can call me and I can call my mentees at any given point of time. Unless we are working in that kind of a relationship, it's really not possible. How to help the company or startup to grow. It's very difficult. That level of relationship has to be there. And of course, it has to start with a need. And I agree to what Sumanta said. It has to start with a need. Unless we identify the need, you will not find it. Otherwise, it will always be one of. I'm facing this particular challenge in my career right now. Okay, it could be that, and for that you can definitely talk to different mentors, get the right advice, of course, whom you trust, and whose advice you will actually go and implement. Otherwise, just seeking inputs does not help, right? So taking action is equally important. As a mentee, it's very important that we implement. It's a mentor may give you just one particular piece of strategy, but you have to take that strategy and implement it. And that's when it starts working. If there is no action, that the relationship also does not get resolved.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing attention to that. I'm seeing that we're now starting to talk about what are the responsibilities of the mentee as well, apart from the mentor, that we've been focusing on right now. I had a couple more audience poll questions, but I'm going to skip through them. They were one was an individual may only have one mentor at a time, and I think Hemakshi's already talked about that for us a little bit, about how you can have multiple mentors and leverage their expertise in different areas for your purposes. And another one was mentors must be older than mentees. Now, instead of going through that poll question, I'd like to go through one question for my panel here, which is, well, this question is more related to using mentoring as a solution to solve problems. It could be in any type of a sector or an organization, but what are the key roles that a mentor and mentee would need to play to make a mentoring relationship successful? I know Sovan has already talked a little bit about thinking about action and impact, but I'd love to hear from everyone.
Okay, so let me understand a little more. Rhea. What you are essentially saying is that what is the
what is the key role that a mentor or a mentee would need to play to make a mentoring relationship successful?
So again, let me bring. Let's talk about a professional journey or a career building, career development part of it. Now, typical problems, every mentee comes with some kind of a problem. It always comes with, I'm not able to grow in my career. My boss is not treating me. or I did not get the right rating. And that is how it typically starts with a person starts talking to a mentor. Now, when we talk about you being as a mentor and giving a career advice to them, we need to understand their situation completely. We need to take that ownership and really understand, what is the current situation, what is the setup, what is the situation which is there, and and also understand what the person is willing to do. Many times we think that as a mentor we can give advice. It's not about giving advice. It's about helping the mentee find their solution, which they are aligned to it, which is most best and appropriate for them. So we have to actually help them figure out the right solution by asking different questions, by creating different situations and helping them realize what they want. For example, somebody may say that I want to completely change my role from a technical to an HR. We have to go and have multiple discussions and ask multiple questions to understand that what is your long-term impact. It is not just about this short-term shift from your technical to an HR kind of a situation. So there we have to really have that level of communication and a discussion. A genuine, unless there is a genuine intent and an interest to help the mentee from a mentor, it's not going to happen. It's not transactional at all. Whenever we are helping a mentee, it is you are actually helping them to grow in their career or in their business, which means you have to think yourself in that position. What would I do if I'm in the mentee's position? And from that perspective, we give the right, advice, irrespective of whether your mentee is going to come back to you second time or not. That 1 hour or 30 minutes or whatever time that you spend with your mentee, that genuine intent to make sure that there is a value, and that single session, it is not about, okay, I have given a particular advice and this will help me to get another discussion with my mentee. That's not the case. So it's about that even if you spend 30 minutes, you should be able to make a very good impact in terms of that person's life, okay, that person's career. And that is how it all goes. And at the same time, it is not about, okay, at the end of the overall discussion, we say that, okay, this is what we are going to come up with, this is what you are going to do. At that point of time, we have to, as a mentor, help the mentee identify the right set of actions. What the action that the mentee is going to take. It's again not a chit chatting, right? It's not about, okay, it's not about you should try this. There is nothing called try this. We have to really assess the situation and see what is going to be beneficial or best for the mentee, and then come up with a set of actions. And the mentee should be taking that responsibility to taking that action. And there has to be a very honest communication between a mentor and a mentee, where the mentee should be able to say, I don't want to take this action. It's not about, yeah, you gave me this 3 action, let me go and implement it. And then the mentee may not even take any action after that discussion is over. We have to have that level of that kind of environment has to be created by the mentor to the mentee, that mentee should be able to say, no, this may not work. Okay, and that level of conversation, unless it happens, where we come up with the set of actions, and mentee taking the commitment to implement those actions if the mentee feels that is most important and appropriate for them. And then, of course, there could be a follow through after that. That is when the overall relationship as well as real value goes. It's both ways, right, for the mentor as well as the mentee. At the same time, when we talk about a startup or an entrepreneurship, there could be various different challenges which a startup founder may face. The person might be facing challenges with respect to a product market fit, or the person could be facing challenge with respect to the financial modeling or the business model, or may face challenges with respect to how do I create the best pitch deck and talk in front of my investors. So these are all different set of problems. Now, as a mentor, I may not be having the solution for each and every type of this problem. So as a mentor, we should clearly say, I cannot do this, right? And I can connect you to another friend of mine who is better at this particular track. So that honesty is very, very important from a mentor point. At the same time, when we are having the discussion, let's say you give a business or a financial model to to that particular startup, again, it is very, very situational based. We have to really go and study. It is not just giving an advice. We have to also, as a mentor, we also have to go and look at what are the different competition in the same area, same space, what they are doing. And mentee also has to, and we have to give some assignments to the mentee to see how it is evolving and whether they are able to take the right input and advice and go ahead and implement that. So it is both nurturing, it is brainstorming, it is helping each other, making sure that there is enough value to the mentees as well as to the mentor. And how does the mentor get value? Mentor gets value when the mentees goes and implement that action, and that action actually results in a positive. That is how the mentors get the value.
Thank you, Sovan, for sharing that perspective from the entrepreneurial sector and how mentor and mentee would need to act for a mentoring relationship to be successful. I'd like to hear from Sumanta something about how this might play out in a socio-cultural sector as well, which is a little bit different from the entrepreneurial.
Right. Can you come up with the more clarity of your the topic?
So my question was, what are the key roles that a mentor would need to play and a mentee would need to play to make a mentoring relationship successful?
Okay. I am absolutely agreed. I am actually, I cannot explain more. Sovan had explained it immediately. This is not only mentor's job. Obviously, it is not we are not assigned to do that only. Because mentees, when a mentee coming to you, a mentor, asking for help, guidance, there should be a co-exploration thing. It's not a one-way thing, as we have been saying it a number of times. But why it is not a one-way thing? Because I cannot sit in anyone's mind and explore what he or she is thinking. Until unless that person is coming up with objections, ideas, appreciations, whatever. These reactions should be there, not by words, by approaches, by work also. So for me, a mentee's key role should be always not portraying your mentor as a godfather. That's the main thing, or godmother. That's the main thing we should not do at first. Yes, gradually building relationship, building things, solving problems, it can happen. But we do not approach any mentor seeing as a godmother or godfather. Because whenever we might get advices, we might get many things from many people, but why we don't call advisor a mentor? Why the mentorship is a different thing? Why? Because of something else. It's not what I'm giving, it is about how I'm giving. So what the mentee should be deciding is what he is trying to get from the mentor. The mentor should not impose what you are seeking. Mentee should express what he or she is seeking, or what is right for him or her. That is the key role of a mentee for me.
Great, thank you so much.
Obviously, we can help them to make those decisions. Obviously, sometimes they feel like this will be way more than bold to say, no, I cannot. No, it might not help me. But we should show that much of empathy, obviously, to make that circumstances.
Thank you for sharing that, Sumanta. So, from all of the conversation we've had so far, it's pretty clear how mentoring is a very useful solution to promote professional development and actually accelerate it at some points. And also, it's not limited to just problem solving, but also encouraging and building confidence in whatever someone's doing, especially amongst the youth. One of the challenges that we, like CoLab works in the education sector, we grapple with in education is how do you enable access to mentorship at scale? We've had a conversation about how it's debatable if mentoring should be structured and the frequency of it should be set versus should it be more fluid and accessed whenever there's a need. With all of the subjectivity around mentoring and with how popular it is, how my question to the panel is, how do you think we can develop the capacity of the system to build mentors within our system and solve some of the more pressing challenges in any sector that we're working in? I'd love to hear from Hemakshi, Aarti, Daniel.
Yeah, so I worked with students from ISDM, I worked with students from TIS, and many of them have told me, so usually mentoring is added on as an afterthought, to their kind of academic, to the syllabus. So usually it comes at the end, of their studies, at the end of the year or whatever. And they have told me, if we had some mentoring at the beginning, before we selected our electives, it would have helped us kind of be more deliberate about what choices we want to make with regard to what professional credentials we want to get, and narrow down, rather than taking all the electives, we can focus on some electives. So I think that is one step that institutions can take, is to ensure that when employees are being recruited, when students are joining an institution, to have some kind of mentoring at the beginning, so that they can chart a path, through either the academic career or through their professional journey within an institution, identify whether there's a career path for them. I think someone mentioned, somebody is doing program and now wants to do HR, to prevent that confusion. What kind of so the first recommendation I would have is to make sure that mentoring is provided at the beginning of a journey. The second recommendation that I would have is to identify the barriers to mentoring. What are the barriers that prevent mentoring, and then how do we systematically address some of these barriers, so that young people, especially those who are underprivileged, those who are marginalized, can benefit from the experience of people who have been there, who have done it, and that requires kind of an urgency, both from a social point of view, where patriarchy and social norms prevent especially girls from advancing, to policy, where there is a demographic dividend that is happening in India right now. How do we capitalize on these young people entering the workforce? What are some of the systemic policies that we have to make towards mentorship? Now I know that the government has done some work around the blue book and all of that, but who owns it? Who's accountable for it to implement it? And this is in all spheres. Whether it be young organizations, whether it be young politicians, whether it be young entrepreneurs, whether it be young professionals. What are the different avenues for them to kind of access mentorship? And the third point I want to talk about is this point which someone mentioned. Just because you say you're a mentor on LinkedIn, what makes you a mentor? So is there some kind of process, to identify, who's a mentor, and what are some of the characteristics that you need to kind of, meet. And I'm not talking about a privileged section, of professionals or privileged section of society who can be mentors. I'm talking about, what are the capabilities, that it's around communication, it's around, empathy, it's around some of the things that we discussed, and it's around, experience. So I think these are three recommendations I would have, around inclusion, around the systems and policies, and then around some kind of credential or certification, for who's kind of a mentor. Yeah, and different organizations have different ways of, identifying mentors. So that's fine, as long as there's some process, to acknowledge them and hold them accountable.
Thank you, Daniel. I think it also makes us think if mentors are possess characteristics that are inherent, or can they be built? And if they can be built, then how? How do we start that process of getting mentors together to solve our more pressing challenges?
Yeah, so I think someone mentioned that this has evolved. So we have seen that there are certain people, young people go to, or organizations go to, for advice, for guidance, for counseling. What are the characteristics of why they go to those particular sources? And we can kind of use those characteristics, as best practice, to identify mentors.
I just want to make a point here. I'm not a scale person at all. I feel sometimes scale is the enemy of content, but that's just my view. One of the things that I think maybe can be done a lot better and a lot more of is mentors really interacting with each other to learn from each other. I don't see very many formal forums where that that sort of happens, right? Because I think so in the the I-Wallet whiteboard, for example, I think the strength of the group is the fact that the group also there's a lot of peer learning from one another, right? And I think just in terms of time and cost and everything, it would be a wonderful way to optimize. And I just wondered if there are. I'm sure there are more than 1,000 mentors for whatever the number of startups there might be. But there was a way in which some of the learnings from the mentors could be brought together. You might find an organization or an entrepreneur in the middle of a small town in Madhya Pradesh who may not have access to that, but the collective wisdom is still available to her or him. So that was just the limited point I wanted to make.
Quickly wanted to say something about mentoring children, because I know Mantra for Change works with children. I was a Teach for India fellow myself. And I feel like I don't agree with I agree with everything else that Daniel said, but not the certification point, because I think that just creates more barriers and lesser people are in the pool of mentoring. But I think having worked with children, I know they're the easiest target, so to say, कि हाँ बच्चों को mentor दे देते हैं. Let's give mentor to these children. But I think they're the most vulnerable and sensitive group of population. So there needs to be some checks and safety measures for both physical and psychological safety of children. So if we can ensure those, and then if needed scale up, or just each of us does it in their own communities. But I think that I would definitely put some measures to ensure the safety of children, often because they don't speak up if something wrong happens. But otherwise, yeah, I think like every organization in their small ways, if we can promote mentoring, if we can encourage people to sign up as volunteers, create incentives, and not just incentives in terms of money, but also you get half a day in a week to just mentor organizations or volunteer with organizations to do it. So just smaller incentives at a local or at an org level, I think can really help to build a culture of mentoring. I would say the same for volunteering, that I think Aarti is an expert.
Thank you, Hemakshi. It's just so I meant certification in a very loose way. It's not a formal paper certificate, saying that this person is certified as a mentor. It's more to ensure that there's consistency, in the language that we speak, right? So, for example, Aarti mentioned that there are very few networks for mentors, to kind of get together and share experiences and share. But we don't have consistency of language. So when I say capacity building, it might be very different from what Sumanta might understand as capacity building from an IIM point of view. But to ensure that we are all using the same language. For example, for the development sector, when you use the term indicators, it has a certain characteristic meaning. Everybody knows what it is. It has certain principles and characteristics. So like that, during mentoring also, I think organizations should understand, the language and the consistency of language. Right. For example, when you say I am going to enable, somebody, what does that enablement mean? Is it giving something? Is it linking? Is it facilitation? So I think some kind of consistency where mentors can speak to each other and understand each other in a consistent way, I think is important. So different organizations have their own particular language, and for example, Hemakshi, you mentioned that, it's important to ensure that there's some kind of checks and balances to ensure that there's no increasing vulnerability. So all for example, development organizations, they have code of conducts. They have for example, Save the Children Fund has a policy on kind of engaging with children and all of that. So I think those are kind of the measures that I'm talking about. Yeah. So for example, an organization, if they designate a mentor, they want to see some kind of characteristics in that person. That person should be able to listen. That person should, have empathy. Things like that. So that is what I meant by, some kind of certification.
I completely agree. Sorry, I know we're running out of time, but one of the things that's annoyed me enormously in the pandemic, especially on the volunteering front, is that every Tom, Dick, Jane, and Jolly thinks that she or he can be a mentor to a child. I mean, everybody is out there saying, okay, I have time, can I mentor a child? And it's really, really annoying because, I'm like, no, you can't. I mean, not everybody can. First of all, I ask the child if the child wants to be mentored. Somehow I feel as a sector, we reduce children to Hemakshi's point as objects, right? Like, okay, here is a child that needs mentoring, that needs English, that needs maths, that needs education. We won't ask the kid whether they need any of this at all. And here are a bunch of people who think that they can provide all of this, and then we make that sort of available. It really gets my hopes on.
I think we can all agree that we need the right balance between encouraging more mentoring in the system, because we know that it'll work as a solution, but also at the same time we want to make sure that mentoring is a little bit more standardized. It has the consistent terminology being used for it, and there's a selection criteria or something of that sort that helps us identify who a mentor is and what can they mentor about, instead of it just being like a free-for-all type of thing. But we're all looking at the time, and we're a little bit over, so I would like to stop here. At the same time, I hope that this webinar elicits more conversation around mentoring, the concept itself, and how do we use that as a solution that can help us solve some of the more pressing challenges in all of our sectors. Thank you so much, panelists, for taking out time to talk about this. This was the fact that we run out of time and we still have 3 unanswered questions on the Q&A panel, and we had a couple of questions in the chat box that went unanswered, is a sign that more people want to talk about it, that there are questions that are left that need to be debated about a lot, and so that this becomes common practice, that mentoring is common practice, and it's with mentoring that programs are started, and it's not an afterthought like one of you mentioned. So there is immense scope for establishing mentoring structures for various purposes across the education ecosystem in India as well, which is where CoLab works. So the National Education Policy of 2020 also proposed mentoring as a very strong solution at various levels to improve the quality of outcomes, be it for students, for teachers, and for educational institutions as well, educational institution leaders. To this effect, the National Commission for Teacher Education has released a working document called the Blue Book on Mentoring. And it details a little bit about the National Mission for Mentoring, the link to which Arshad has shared on the chat box. They are inviting feedback on that working document, and I would encourage you all to visit that document and provide your feedback to NCTE, because they plan to use it as a document to talk more about mentoring, establish a culture of mentoring, and help institutions establish their own mentoring structures to solve their problems. With this, I would like to conclude this session. Thank you again so much, panelists and audience, for interacting throughout the session. It was lovely chatting with everyone. Yes.
Thank you, Rhea.
Thank you, Rhea.
So much. Wonderful conversation.
Thanks, everyone. It was great interacting with all of you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. And for everyone else on the audience, if you would like to stay connected to CoLab and the other CoLabOrate sessions that we do, it's a once in a month session. Please follow us on social media, and we'd love to interact with you there as well. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend. Thank you.